Hope you're ready for today's story. Have you ever recognized someone just by the way they walk? It's fascinating how distinct movements can reveal so much about a person. Recently, I found myself experiencing this firsthand. While at a hotel, I noticed a woman entering who moved and behaved in a way that instantly reminded me of my wife, Linda. Even though the lighting was dim and visibility wasn't great, her gestures and mannerisms seemed strikingly familiar. However, I quickly dismissed the idea it couldn't be Linda. We had spoken on the phone the night before, and she mentioned nothing about leaving home. Besides, this hotel was far from where we lived. What truly puzzled me was the man walking beside her. Something about him screamed familiarity, and after a moment, it clicked. He bore an uncanny resemblance to Ethan, our boss from the driving school where both Linda and I worked. My stomach knotted as I tried to process what I was seeing. How could they possibly be here, together? The reason I was at this hotel in the first place was due to a last-minute change in our training location. I'd parked in the lot, intending to grab a moment of rest before heading inside, but what I saw shattered any chance of calm. It was hard to believe this was more than a wild coincidence. After all, I'd arrived here on short notice, and my presence seemed just as unlikely as theirs. Still, curiosity wouldn't let me leave. I attempted to call Linda, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, I tried Ethan's office, but the signal in the area was poor, and I couldn't get through. Unable to shake the unsettling sight of Linda and Ethan together, I decided to take a closer look. I walked toward the hotel entrance, careful not to draw attention, and peeked discreetly through the door. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. There they were, Linda and Ethan, standing close. Too close. They held small suitcases and were embracing in a way that left little to the imagination. It wasn't the kind of hug you'd expect from colleagues. It felt intimate, like something more personal. I sat down heavily on the hotel steps, my mind racing in every direction. My breathing grew uneven as realization after realization hit me. It all started to make sense. Linda's strange schedule changes, shifts in her attitude, and even Ethan's recent behavior at work. I'd been brushing off my doubts for months, but now, they felt impossible to ignore. Everything had finally clicked into place. After a while, I forced myself to gather my thoughts and return to my car. As a driving instructor, I prided myself on setting a good example, even in moments of personal turmoil. Carefully, I parked my car and took a deep breath. My next steps had to be deliberate. Without hesitation, I approached the hotel reception desk, waiting for the assistant manager, Laura. I knew her well from previous visits, and her friendly demeanor made it easier to strike up a casual conversation. After exchanging pleasantries, I subtly steered the discussion toward the hotel's recent guests, hoping to confirm what I already suspected. Laura, ever observant, mentioned that the couple I described were registered under the names Mr. and Mrs. Smith. She didn't seem convinced by the names, though. Her raised eyebrow and tilted head said as much. Then she added something that piqued my interest. She casually mentioned that the Smiths had been frequent visitors, appearing at the hotel multiple times over the last few months. According to her, they first came during a conference and booked separate rooms, but their recent visits were notably more intimate. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a growing determination to uncover the truth. My mind spun with questions, but I kept my composure. With Laura's help, I gathered details about their previous stays, noting that they always used the same company credit card. It was enough to deepen my suspicions, but not enough to act just yet. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to take a break and clear my head. I wandered into the hotel bar and ordered a pint of beer, a rare indulgence for me, especially in the morning. Sipping my drink, I replayed everything in my mind, trying to figure out how things had come to this point. Ethan wasn't exactly a ladies' man. He was an average-looking guy, a bit overweight and far from charming. I couldn't fathom what Linda saw in him, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about Ethan. It was about something broken in my marriage, something I hadn't noticed until now. Returning to the hotel lobby, I began piecing together a plan. My goal wasn't confrontation, not yet, at least. I needed solid evidence before I could approach anyone, especially Ethan's wife, Deborah. As I observed Linda and Ethan discreetly from a distance, I felt a pang of sadness. Our relationship hadn't always been like this. We'd been happy once, even adventurous. But as the years passed and life grew busier, something had shifted. Lately, the strain of work and the distance between us had taken its toll. Determined to gather more information, I approached the restaurant staff, who I knew well from previous visits. They discreetly pointed out where Linda and Ethan were seated, and I positioned myself at a nearby table where I could observe without being seen. Watching them interact, laughing, touching, sharing private smiles was like a punch to the gut, confirmed my worst fears, but I knew I needed more than just observations to act. And so I waited. My mind swirled with emotions: betrayal, anger, confusion. But one thought remained clear. I had to see this through to the end. As part of my plan, I tried calling the office to check on Ethan, but I was told he had already left for home. When Linda answered my call, I casually asked, "How's your day going? You sound a bit off. Is your TV on?" She responded with her usual calmness. "Oh, I turned the TV down. It's just background noise. You know how it is at home. There's always something happening, even when you're not around." Something about her tone made me curious, so I asked, "Your voice sounds a bit different. Are you using a new phone?" "No," she said after a slight pause. "I'm just using headphones to record video while we talk." Feigning surprise, I said, "I didn't know you could do that. What are you recording?" She hesitated before answering, "There's a guy here filming everything in the hotel restaurant on his phone." I thought it was interesting. Her response raised my suspicions, but I decided to steer the conversation in another direction. "Are you sure you're at home?" I asked casually. "The background noise doesn't sound like it does when you're calling from the landline." Linda seemed slightly caught off guard. "Yes, it's me," she confirmed, her voice a bit nervous. "Maybe I was in the garden earlier. Sorry I didn't answer your call." "It's fine," I replied smoothly, though my doubts were growing. "This time of year is always busy, so try to relax and don't stress." Linda chuckled lightly. "Of course, darling. Just don't call too late. I might already be in bed." Her remark felt almost calculated. My reply, on the other hand, was tinged with a forced calm. "Yes, it's still early for bed, unless of course you're sharing it with someone interesting." I wasn't sure if my tone betrayed the anger simmering inside me, but Linda was quick to respond. "Oh, darling, you're the only man I love. No one could ever replace you." I pressed further, "Are you sure about that? I thought I was your first choice." Linda's laughter sounded a bit forced. "Are you always this dramatic? Relax." From where I sat, I could see her shifting nervously in her seat, her body language betraying what her words tried to conceal. My instincts told me I was onto something, but I didn't want to show my hand too soon. So, I ended the conversation with a vague "we'll talk later" and hung up. Her reaction intrigued me. Her face was a mix of confusion and worry. She was clearly caught off guard. I decided to seize the moment. Approaching her from behind, I gently tapped her shoulder. She turned around, startled, gasping audibly before collapsing to the floor. The unexpected turn of events caught me completely off guard. Linda's fall was hard, and I hesitated for a moment before rushing to the front desk. "A woman has fainted," I explained hurriedly. I didn't touch her, didn't want to risk any accusations of harassment, but she needs help. One of the waiters nearby acted quickly, lifting Linda and helping her back to the table where Ethan was sitting. As I observed from a distance, my phone still active from our earlier call, I realized I might have accidentally muted the sound instead of ending it. This meant I could still hear their conversation if I played it back. Linda's recovery was swift, though her unease was evident. She glanced at Ethan, whispering urgently, "Michael is here." I saw him, he even tapped me on the shoulder. Ethan looked skeptical, brushing her off. "Michael? He's supposed to be in Lanham. You're imagining things." Linda, visibly shaken, insisted, "I'm not. I was just talking to him on the phone." And then suddenly he was right there. Ethan's composure faltered as he muttered darkly, "If he's here, this could ruin everything. If Michael finds out, Deborah will too, and my life will be over. Linda's tone turned sharp. You should have thought about the consequences before all of this. He can't find out. Desperate to defuse the situation, Ethan suggested, we'll just say it's a business meeting. That should cover it. Linda scoffed. A business meeting? While I'm dressed like this? He won't buy it. Their hushed argument painted a vivid picture of deceit, manipulation, and panic. Ethan, clearly grasping at straws, tried to justify himself. Linda countered with accusations, even suggesting he had coerced her into this mess. Their words cut into each other like daggers, exposing layers of betrayal. Watching their interaction was almost surreal. I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow as I decided it was time to confront them directly. Pulling out my recording pen, a tool all instructors carried, I made my way to their table. Halfway there, my phone, still active, rang loudly, drawing their attention. Linda gasped, recognizing me immediately. Michael, it's not what it looks like. Ethan stammered as I took a seat opposite them. I let out a bitter laugh. Then what is it? A romantic getaway? Or a celebration of betrayal? Linda's face turned pale as I leveled a cold glare at Ethan. You arranged for me to be away 3 nights a week, working myself to exhaustion, all for this? Just wait until Deborah hears about this. The head waiter approached, attempting to calm the situation. Sir, please, this is a respectable establishment. I nodded, forcing a smile. You're absolutely right, Victor. I apologize for the scene. But let's just say some of your guests like to enjoy themselves at others' expense. Turning back to Linda and Ethan, I added with a steely edge, enjoy your dinner on me. But don't think for a second this is over. I snapped a picture of them together, sealing their guilt in a single frame. Now, I said, leaning closer, let's talk truth, or this photo goes straight to Deborah. Care to explain yourselves? Linda opened her mouth to speak, but the weight of her guilt silenced her. I had them cornered, and this was only the beginning. Ethan interjected, no, there would be different shadows. Then Linda quickly countered, damn, another deception. Ethan expressed his disappointment. I asked the waiter to bring me a hotel brochure to show them the explanation of the photo. When I did that, Linda realized her mistake and confessed it was a photo shoot for advertising. Laura just led me through a room that was not my bedroom but an office. The looks exchanged between Linda and Ethan indicated that they understood the situation and the atmosphere tense. She turned to Ethan and yelled in anger, let's get this straight. You sent my husband away telling me he asked for it, even though he didn't. You falsified photos making it look like he had an affair, drugged me, treated me inappropriately, blackmailed, and threatened my marriage and career. It took her a few minutes to compose herself, while it took me several hours to come up with a response to that. It's amazing that her slap didn't break his jaw. The whole restaurant, including the famous influencer, froze and watched us, and the atmosphere was filled with dead silence. The influencer kept recording. She was already preparing to slap him again, and I almost let her do it until I noticed a Mater D heading towards us. I grabbed her hand and whispered, calm down or well get kicked out, and am not finished yet. Seeing this, the Mater D stepped back while dead silence reigned in the restaurant. Everyone secretly stared at us, preparing for the next episode. They seemed to be enjoying it. This is only getting worse, I said. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but here we are. I took a half-full glass of wine from Ethan and took a sip. Delicious. You'll miss the Schwarzkatz is also to my liking, I added, placing the glass in front of me. At that moment, the Mater D brought me a steak and whispered insistently, be quieter or it'll kick everyone out. I understood the hint and decided to make an effort to keep calm. I looked at the Mater D and apologized. I'm sorry, Victor, I'll be more restrained at the table. I think he appreciated that I remembered his name. Let's start with what was a turning point for me. Cyril retired and Thomas got injured from falling down the stairs. This provided you with the opportunity to send me to the northern sector, where I was supposed to stay away from home for at least 2 days, but as it turned out, it stretched to 3 days. You knew I wouldn't let the company or the client down. That's exactly what you had. To your advantage, you promised to find a replacement for me and handle the workload. I looked at Linda and asked, how many interviews has he conducted in the last 5 months to find a replacement for Cyril? I'm not aware of any, but he claims that you're satisfied with the situation and enjoying the extra money. Money can't replace time spent away from family. I drank a glass of wine to give myself time to think. Has he ever posted a job vacancy? I haven't seen such an announcement. Furthermore, he suggested you participate in a driving simulator symposium. Don't you think that his wife, who owns the company, would be better suited to make such a decision than someone involved in office work? But she was feeling unwell, so she couldn't go, and the hotel room was already booked, so he had to rent another one. Why was she sick? I asked. She's allergic to nuts. How could he give her nuts and trigger an allergic reaction without warning her? But considering his help to you, I wouldn't judge him. You poison your wife, you monster. He looked at his knees during my accusations, but now he raised his head and declared I wouldn't do that to Deborah. I love her. Linda intervened. Then, why did you sleep with me? She approached me and sat down next to me. I'm sorry, can we talk about this? I finished another piece of steak, looked at her, and said maybe later. Leighton first address other issues. Okay, let's talk about the symposium and blackmail. I only heard bits of your conversation. I suggested. Linda told me that she woke up naked in Ethan's bed after heavy drinking. He helped her stay overnight by offering his room the next day. He showed her compromising photos and threatened her with dismissal and accusations. This information angered me, but I tried to remain calm. Leaning over the table, I grabbed his hand and placed a steak knife blade down on the back of his wrist. So you drugged and raped my wife, you despicable bastard. He became flustered, looked at me, and said, no, I didn't violate her. Why would I do that? Sleep with someone lifeless like a dead fish? There's no pleasure in that. I took another bite of the steak, which turned out to be very tasty, just like the wine. I used this moment to calm myself, but at the same time to tease Linda and Ethan even more. Leighton, move on to finances. I assume you're paying for all this? I asked. Yes, of course. Ethan replied. I noticed how many times you stayed here with her using the same credit card, and it was the company's credit card. Turning to Linda, I added, that's a beautiful dress. I can guess you have stylish lingerie underneath. I haven't seen that on you before. Where did it come from? She lowered her head, then slowly raised it and said, there, and brought it. He said it would suit me. It was magnificent. Ethan definitely had good taste. And who paid for all these meals, dates, and sexy clothing, him or the company? I suggest that on Monday when you come in you carefully analyze his expenses just like mine and provide a report to management. There's one more question I want to ask. Why are you here in this hotel? I asked Linda. I decided to use this as payback for what happened last time when you cheated on me, she replied, but I called Ethan and informed him of the change in plans, after which I went to the next meeting. Linda's face turned pale. She glanced at Ethan and said, you knew where he was heading, yet you still brought me here. You're a real selfish person, only caring about yourself, aren't you? No, I just received a message about his assignment. They made a mistake in the office. They thought he was going from Lanham to Warminster, not the other way around. Ethan explained, even if that's true, we would still end up here at the same time as him. Linda replied, but he didn't follow my plan that I gave him. I interjected, allowing them to discuss while I finished my steak. All right, let's sum it up. Firstly, you used my loyalty to the company and the client to make me do things I didn't want. You forced me to leave home for 3 nights a week and work so diligently that by Friday I was so exhausted that all I could think of was sleep. You deceived me about the job change. There wasn't even an announcement about a replacement. You drugged my wife and then took compromising photos for blackmail, demanding more sex. You fabricated evidence to convince my wife that I was cheating on her. You used company funds for your evenings and gifts for her. This is corporate theft. What will your boss Deborah say about this? You did all this just to sleep with my wife? Yes, he said quietly, nodding his head. Linda stared at me, frowning. So this is Deborah's company? Minute ago you mentioned senior management. What exactly do you mean by senior management? I thought Ethan was the top. It's his business. He's the senior management. I shook my head. No, it's Deborah's company. She owns it. Her father founded it. And he was clear that this person should not have any stake in it. He holds the position of director, but it's not his company. But she hardly ever shows up. We only see her 5 or 6 times a year. Despite his awful qualities, he seems to know how to run the company and fulfills his duties well. She doesn't need to come, but I'm sure she'll be interested in how he spends company funds, especially on personnel intrigue. I had never seen Linda so furious. She reached for the key card to my room and said, give me the key card to your room. Let's not argue, just give it. I handed her the key card without argument. If needed, I could book another room later. She left the restaurant playing with the steak knife. I turned to Ethan. You'll do as I say, or I'll tell Deborah about what you two were up to. Heat tomorrow morning. You'll call Deborah, tell her I'm sick, and since you'll be nearby, you'll take care of my affairs. I decided to take a day off to focus on saving my marriage, so when you return home tomorrow evening, tell Deborah that I've decided to return to studying and want to dedicate more time to it. Every 2 weeks, you'll take over my workouts. I understand this will disrupt the continuity of training, but well managed. Then you'll explain to Deborah that I'll take over your work while you focus on yours. This way we'll have a plan of succession in case of unexpected circumstances, like if one of us wants to take a vacation or gets into an accident. I added with a threatening tone. He pondered. Are you sure this will work? I think so. We just have to trust each other. You don't want Deborah to find out about our plans directly, right? Yes, of course. But how will I know you won't betray me? There's no reason not to trust me otherwise. Both of us will have to face the consequences, as we both want to keep our jobs and responsibilities. I'm not ready to lose my position right now. I poured another glass of wine, the mere name of which cost more on my expenses than the entire bottle. I looked at him. So what do you say? He smiled. I think it makes sense and can work. We just have to convince Deborah. I didn't like his smile. Don't forget that if our plan leaks, it will be unpleasant for everyone. We both like our jobs, but that won't stop us if we are forced. Then you'll write a letter to Deborah, telling her the whole story of your attempts to win Linda over, including the use of company resources to soften the blow. I laid my arguments, explaining why I decided not to expose you to public ridicule. Deborah is an old friend of mine. We've been friends for many years, And you were my friend too. I don't want any of us to suffer more, so I'm counting on your loyalty, and the letter will remain with me as a backup at that moment. Linda returned. She walked a bit slower, but still determined. She changed clothes and sat next to me, remarking, better this way. I felt uncomfortable in my previous outfit. I threw away all unnecessary things. And Ethan, I wouldn't advise Deborah to dig into your baggage. There might be surprises. Looks like I lost a pair of panties now. Ethan wasn't smiling. I continued, all right, now you'll stop playing games and be loyal to Deborah, because if I notice you continuing your antics, I won't have to bring up this issue again. I'll just tell Deborah everything you've done. Ethan raised his head and shook it in disbelief. I won't write the letter, but I'll do everything else. I understood him giving up control of the situation. It wasn't as simple as it seemed. I picked up the phone receiver and said calmly, I've already recorded everything, and this letter will go straight to Deborah. Ethan raised his hands in surrender. Enough. I'll handle this myself. Even if you take this to court, a letter like that won't hold up, and it shouldn't even exist. Its contents should only ever be discussed privately with Deborah. I leaned across the table and let out a bitter laugh. Sure, Ethan. I'm sure the boss will just drop everything and draft up a letter of admission right now. It's just that easy, isn't it? I gestured toward Linda. And she just has to magically save her marriage, right? Linda took my hand, her eyes locking onto mine. Do you think we still have a chance, really? When I came here, it felt like life as I knew it was intact. But after hearing everything from both of you and seeing what this manipulative man has done, it feels like hell on earth. I just don't know. I nodded toward Ethan, who stood up abruptly and walked away without a word. How did you even manage to let him deceive you like this? I asked, still trying to piece it all together. Linda sighed deeply. I've been reflecting on that while I was changing, and I think I've found the answer. It's a mix of revenge, excitement, and the lack of attention, especially the lack of intimacy. It's been a problem for a while now, hasn't it? For days a week, you're away. Her voice trailed off, and I could see she was searching for the right words. I've thought about it too, she continued. But my thoughts are tangled. There's no clear order, no structure. First of all, I need to apologize. I am so sorry for the betrayal and pain I've caused you. I'm sorry we're even in this situation. Yes, Ethan deceived me, but I bear responsibility too. Please, forgive me. There's something you need to know, and it might hurt to hear. I tilted my head, bracing myself. Go on, I said quietly. Linda swallowed hard. You're not to blame. You didn't do anything wrong. But when I saw that photo of you with Laura, the secretary, entering your room late at night, it planted seeds of doubt. Ethan hinted at something between you two. He showed me that photo and asked what I thought you might be plotting. Now, I see it was a trap, fabricated to make me doubt you. I opened my mouth to speak, but Linda leaned in and kissed me lightly, silencing me. Let me finish, please, she said softly. When I found out I was drugged and blackmailed, I should have come to you immediately. But I hesitated because I was thinking about our jobs, our child's university fees. It's not an excuse, just an explanation. And then there was the lack of intimacy. After menopause, I felt irritable and disconnected. I didn't handle it well. I'm not proud of that, and I know it's not an excuse. Linda paused, taking a sip of wine, her hands trembling slightly. There was excitement, too, she admitted. Doing it in a hotel where I thought you had betrayed me made it feel thrilling. And now that I know it wasn't true, I feel horrible. She placed her finger gently on my lips when I tried to interject. No, don't say anything yet. I need to finish this. I brought all of this upon myself. Gifts, attention, they don't matter. I didn't use any of it against you. And honestly, what Ethan and I did, it wasn't special. It was just physical. Nothing more. Linda looked down at the table, her voice quieter now. Maybe I compartmentalized it all. I kept everything in separate mental boxes, work in one, life with you in another, and him in a very small one. When I was with him, I didn't think about the other boxes. It was as if they didn't exist. It's not an excuse. It's just how I coped. I nodded slowly, trying to process her words. Linda, I said after a moment, I've already decided to forgive you, but forgetting, that will take time. Let's go to my room and talk this through. Her faint smile returned. Thank you, she whispered. But this will be a conversation. I'll let you know when I'm ready to move forward. 3 weeks passed, and Linda and I walked into the office one morning, slightly late. The atmosphere was tense. Colleagues were gathered around a laptop, some stunned into silence while others chuckled awkwardly. As we entered, the room fell into dead silence, and embarrassed expressions replaced the chuckles. What's going on here? I asked, breaking the tension. First laughter, now this? Michael, one of the senior team members, spoke up hesitantly. We found something on YouTube. It looks like your conversation with Ethan. In the restaurant, there are 4 videos. We're only halfway through the first. Linda's face turned pale. Maybe it's better not to watch the rest, she suggested, her voice shaking. Please, don't tell Deborah. Just then, Deborah herself appeared behind us. Don't tell Deborah about what? She demanded, her tone sharp. Linda and I turned in unison, both exclaiming, "Oh my God!" Deborah grabbed the laptop, clicking on the video. The title read, Husband Catches Wife with Lover in Restaurant. Ethan's face was unmistakably clear in the thumbnail, and upon closer inspection, so was mine. Deborah exhaled audibly, her eyes narrowing. You both, my office. Now. Without waiting for a response, she strode away, leaving us no choice but to follow. As I walked past my desk, I grabbed a few things. This was the moment I had been dreading and preparing for. Linda and I entered Deborah's office, closing the door behind us. Deborah turned, her fury barely contained. What the hell is going on here? She demanded. I thought we were friends, Michael. Why didn't you tell me about this? Linda stepped forward, lowering her gaze.
I'm sorry, Deborah.
I ruined everything, she said quietly. I was with Ethan. Deborah leaned back in her chair, her expression one of profound disappointment. This is unbelievable. I never thought you'd make such a decision, Linda. Turning to me, Deborah's voice cracked. Michael, did you know about this? And if you did, why didn't you come to me sooner? I took a deep breath, knowing this conversation was far from over. Deborah, I began. I deeply regret this, but Ethan had manipulated Linda from the start. He'd discovered her struggle with menopause and her increased libido, then used that knowledge against her. He planted the idea that I was having an affair and orchestrated my 3-night-a-week absences from home, leaving me so exhausted by Friday that our relationship had become practically lifeless. Once he had her vulnerable, he introduced drugs into the mix, took compromising photos, and blackmailed her into compliance. It all culminated at the driving simulator event, the one Deborah couldn't attend because of her illness. Most of this was unknown to Deborah, and as I sat across from her, I placed a letter from Ethan, a flash drive, and a voice recorder on the desk. Linda joined me, her expression somber as she prepared to speak. Deborah, Linda began, we didn't tell you earlier because we didn't know what to do. Should we reveal the truth and risk destroying your marriage? Or should we keep it hidden to preserve your happiness? We thought you were content, and we didn't want to shatter that. I added, Ethan wrote down everything he did to Linda and signed it. We explained to him the consequences of his actions. Linda wanted to tell you immediately, but I assumed you wouldn't want to know, especially since we believed this was an isolated incident. We had no idea it had happened before. I slid the recordings toward Deborah. Here are audio and video files of what you saw on YouTube. This is everything. Deborah's face was unreadable as she leaned back in her chair, processing our words. After a long silence, she finally spoke. I need time to think about all this. Please leave. Linda lingered for a moment, but I nudged her gently. We exited the office, but Linda returned after half an hour with a coffee for Deborah. She knocked on the door, and when there was no response, she cautiously entered. I watched her go, my thoughts growing darker. Feeling uneasy, I followed shortly after and found Linda embracing a tearful Deborah. Linda waved me over, and the 3 of us shared a quiet hug. After a few moments, Deborah regained her composure and gently pushed us away. Thank you, she said, her voice soft. I needed that. As we stepped back, Deborah added, Linda, thank you for the coffee. I'll need another cup in about 20 minutes. Her tone was a subtle shift, maybe a hint of forgiveness or at least an easing of the tension. The rest of the day passed in silence, everyone in the office subdued. Then, without warning, Ethan burst into the room, his face red with anger. He headed straight for me, his footsteps heavy. I raised my hands in surrender. I didn't tell her, Ethan. Blame the influencer and YouTube. He hesitated, then changed course and stormed into Deborah's office, slamming the door behind him. The thin walls did nothing to muffle the explosion that followed. You're a liar, a manipulative scoundrel. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues and friends. You're fired. Deborah's voice was thunderous, impossible to ignore. You can't fire me for this. Ethan yelled back, desperation creeping into his tone. Deborah's retort was sharper. I'm firing you for your wasteful spending, but let's not pretend this doesn't play a part. But I love you. Ethan's voice cracked, as if he thought that would save him. It was just a joke. It didn't mean anything. Deborah's response was a roar. You risked our marriage, your job, and our friend's marriage for what? A moment of pleasure? Do you realize Linda can hear you? Another loud bang followed, and then Deborah's voice dropped, becoming cold and measured. And that's for Linda, because she's too kind to treat you the way you deserve. The shouting subsided into murmurs, but it was clear the conversation was still heated. When they finally emerged half an hour later, Ethan's face was pale, and Deborah's was set in an icy calm. She addressed the room. To everyone here, Ethan has been fired, but for practical reasons, I've rehired him as an instructor at a basic salary. If he chooses to leave, he'll lose the family home. Michael will take over all of Ethan's responsibilities, except for directorial duties, for now. Turning to Linda, Deborah added, Ethan will be giving you daily tracker and surveillance data. If you suspect anything, let me know immediately. All hotel contracts are canceled. He will return home every night and you won't need to track his expenses anymore. I'll handle that. Every penny he spends will come out of his own pocket until he repays the company for what he stole. Understood. Linda nodded, her face composed. Ethan, meanwhile, looked utterly defeated. I couldn't help but wonder if Deborah was weighing the possibility of divorce, though she wasn't showing her hand just yet. As for Linda and me, we began to rebuild. She worked hard to make amends, and I allowed her the space to prove her sincerity. We even found new ways to rekindle the excitement we'd lost, though occasionally, our adventures took us too far. Like the time we were asked to leave a store for misusing the fitting rooms. As we left the store that day, a security guard whispered, "Have a good day, buddy." The irony wasn't lost on me, and Linda couldn't stop laughing. Despite everything, those moments of levity reminded me that maybe, just maybe, we could find happiness again. As we walked hand in hand through the park, I realized that the house wasn't the only thing filled with joy. We were starting to fill it with love again, too.